Hey, good morning, good afternoon. My name is Ryan. I work here at Crow Canyon. We're going to be covering our asset management application today for SharePoint on-premise and Office 365, SharePoint Online. We're just going to wait a few seconds here as people trickle in before we hop into the product itself. It should be a relatively uh, quick webinar today. But like I said, as folks trickle in, I just kind of want to talk a little bit about Crow Canyon and who we are, what we represent, and frame our webinar for today. So again, my name's Ryan. I'm the goofy looking gentleman in the picture here at the bottom. And today we're talking about asset tracking, asset management. Really where all of our applications fit into whether it's SharePoint on-premise or Office 365 is as a natural extension of your environment. And our goal here is to really give you the ability to take advantage of your 365 space, right? Based on our current situation, most of us being shelter in place or now working remote more permanently, the idea of using a platform that we've already invested in as a collaborative platform makes a lot of sense, right? So this asset management demo or demo webinar, whatever you want to call it, is a series of webinars that we've been doing specifically around that idea, that topic, this service desk idea, if you will. So we started as with the tip of the spear as this employee self-service portal. And that's always going to be kind of a reoccurring theme when we talk about any of our applications here at Crow Canyon, with the idea of this being like the tip of the spear, the self-service portal. And it's your employees' first interaction with your departments, our application layers, right? Our layer here at the bottom, our departmental staff. Our self-service portal can be SharePoint based, right? It can sit as a part of your intranet. We also have some new and exciting things coming out from a Teams integration, whether it's creating requests via chatbot or having an entire application be accessible via Teams. For those Office 365 customers, again, the SharePoint for 365 or on-prem, the SharePoint portal interface. But the idea is similar, right? We build this hierarchy, this structure within inside of your 365 environment to take ownership of your entire business process needs. So self-service portal is where the end user submits the request, and then our application layer is where our departmental staff works the request. So those employees can submit a request across any department. All of our applications that we offer here at the bottom. We've covered IT help desk in our webinar series. We've covered onboarding, request management, contract management, purchasing. So if you want to go back and look at any of those webinars, we do have them on demand on our website. I encourage you to do so because they all fit inside of this structure. So today we're going to be focusing on IT asset management, or really asset management, equipment tracking. I mean, the idea is the same. It's managing and maintaining assets that you're responsible for. So let's segue into our demo here. So really the idea, and I've said it a few times, but I'm going to keep coming back to this point, is how our applications interact with each other, whether that is lists internally or the applications themselves, right? So as you can see on this first page here, I kind of jumped the gun. We have all these different applications that match up with our application service layer. And the idea is that any of these applications can connect with each other, right? IT can include an asset tracking. A purchase request can automatically create an asset. Oop, click the button. My bad, guys. Let's go back. A purchase request can automatically create an asset. Assets can be related to contracts. Assets can be related to onboarding requests. And the idea is to start to extend all of your, send a connection to all of your different applications within this collaborative platform. So today we're focusing on asset tracking, and that concept really flows into the application itself. That idea of connection, ease of transition from one application to the other is a core concept we use in all of our applications themselves in the way of connecting various lists together. So we have well, let me take a step back. These are SharePoint applications, right? Whether they're SharePoint Online, whether they have a Teams interface, whether they are SharePoint on-premise. So the SharePoint standards still come into play here, right? Lists, libraries, pages, those things that we're used to dealing with from a SharePoint world. We can just view them in separate ways. But all of we have a few different lists that make up the asset tracking application, some major lists, right? And you can see them on the left-hand side here under our quick launch, under our navigation. Assets, software assets, vendors, and contracts. And the idea is that we want to be able to access information from any one of those 4 major lists without having to bounce around screens, right? As a technician, as someone who's tracking assets or equipment, I want to make sure that all of the information that I need is at my fingertips when I pull up any record. So what I mean by that is, if we drill into this asset right here, so I'm in the assets list right now, and I'm looking at a particular asset, we can start to go through the different information associated with this asset. So if you have a loaner bank of assets, or you want to be able to use the employee self-service portal to submit requests, hardware requests, loaner requests for an asset, you have that ability too. And you can actually physically check in or check out assets using something we call custom actions. Now that's a good segue into our Nitro Studio, our tool set. So what I pulled up is a Nitro form. And what that is, it's an application creation platform created and designed by ProCanyon. So all of our applications are managed and maintained on our own platform. Now, if you guys have heard me talk in the past, there's a few reasons I like this approach. One being is that we have complete control over our applications. So from a support perspective, we're not relying on another third party to come in and help us with support. That could bog down support response times. That could bog down a lot of issues when it comes to company to client interactions. The second is the ability to control and keep the price cost effective, right? Cost efficient. With some other tools out there in the space, maybe they charge per flow or per form. They don't give you the ability to take complete ownership of your applications once it's installed in your environment. I think that's a major talking point. Anytime you look at adding in something to your 365 space, is that it's in your space, right? You want to be able to take ownership of it. You want to be able to control it. So that's the idea. Nitro Studio is included in our applications. It's not an additional cost, and you have the ability to come in and change any of the content that we deploy out of the box. So what we've done, coming back full circle now, is added in the ability to add in a custom action to this form, check in or check out an asset to a particular user, maybe update an asset status, right? Run a manually invoked workflow at a date and time of your choosing. And all this relates to our ProCanyon Nitro forms. And our forms are 100% configurable. So I'm going to show you today what comes out of the box, the different columns that we capture, but really these are just SharePoint columns configured into a form. So you're going to be able to manipulate these columns, present them how you see fit. Okay, let's take a look here. Okay, so this first tab, this asset info tab, it's basically like a cover sheet of the asset, right? Its ID, its type. And what's cool here is that we're going to highlight one of those connections between lists here. Asset type is its own list living within the site schema. And we have some information tied to it. So if I come in here and change the asset type to, let's say, printer, you can see the information is going to update appropriately on this front end page, right? If I go back to the desktop, it throttles back. And another thing I want to point out is a little bit of flexibility with what we can do with our forms, talking about that configurability, right? If you keep eyes on this computer tab right here, when I change this to something that isn't a computer, or maybe that doesn't require software to be assigned to it, like this printer, that tab's going to go away. So nothing big, but it just gives you an idea of how the forms can be flexible, some permissions, ideas, things like that. So make, model, serial number, barcode number, if you have a barcode scanning option, that's a possibility to have that integrated with our tool set. Now it's not something we include out of the box, but it's something that if you're using, we can look at integrations with. We also work with another vendor, another partner that has some barcode scanning options as well through a third-party app. If you're interested in that, please let us know. But right here, I'm going to point out another couple connections to our secondary list, our child list in this case, right? So if the asset list is the parent list, our vendors and our contracts are our child list. So you can see we can assign different assets to different vendors, as well as assign them different contract service dates, right? So what's cool about really any date column in any of our forms is that you can assign, let's make this 2020 though, you can assign a responsible entity, a workflow, a notification workflow, I should say, based around this date column. So if you want someone to be notified, hey, this group of assets contract is coming due on this day, and you want them to be notified 90 days in advance, 60 days, 30 days, that's entirely up to you, right? We have the ability, leveraging again that workflow tool, to make or to allow you to ping those people as aggressively as you choose is typically my go-to phrase. But really, I think it's as quick as every 2 minutes. Don't quote me on that, but it can be pretty quick. Or you can set up a date and time cadence of your choosing to make sure that these contracts are putting, or someone's putting eyes on these contracts at the date and time cadence of your liking. Now, location and owner, I mean, this gives a first example of how we can tie in with maybe SharePoint user profiles, Active Directory, maybe a user's list, but it gives you the ability to assign someone to a particular asset. All you have to do is start typing in their name and add them in. And then a little bit more of a granular idea of how assets can be tracked, right, in terms of their location, maybe what department they're in, what location it's at, what building it's in, room and rack number. Again, the multitude of different people that have our asset application always configure this tab specifically to their, to their own needs. And that's something I just want to highlight again. I know I've talked about it a little bit already, but this is an example of where we can configure the form to make it make sense for you. Maybe you don't need room or rack number. Those can be easily removed from the form to make sure that it presents the information that you want. Now, history and finance, date acquired, purchase price, date of decommission, depreciation method, maybe an invoice number, a total maintenance cost, but invoice number. So a lot of us are using like maybe third-party ERP systems or storing invoices in another application. Maybe some on this call are using our purchasing application, the Crow Canyon purchasing application. And the cool thing about building connections to not only Crow Canyon applications is that we can cut down on duplicate data. I should say not only Crow Canyon applications, but other third-party tools, we can cut down on duplicate data. So if you want to pull in an invoice number from a third-party tool outside of the SharePoint world, awesome. We have REST API services that are available in Nitro Studio for you to be able to do that. It can be on form load, it can be on a column change, it can be at a time of your choosing. You have the ability to determine how much you want to pull into this SharePoint list item, to this asset tracking application. And if you want to connect it to our purchasing application, awesome. It's something that could easily be pulled over to track that information here. Now image, you can store an image of the asset, and then this computer tab, right? So this is again, oh, we got a lot of software on here. This is again an example of, okay, this asset type has, an operating system, has a machine type, has a computer type, maybe a processing speed, RAM, etc., IP address, and then the ability to connect to one of our other lists, in this example, another child list, but one of our main lists in the system here. And that is the ability to run installed software against a hardware asset. So let's say you're onboarding a new, you're onboarding a new employee, and someone fires off the onboarding request in the Crow Canyon onboarding application. It creates IT tickets. The IT team gets assigned tickets, and then they get prompted to go into the asset management tracking application to assign not only an asset to a person, right, under our tab here, but also software to that asset to make sure that that person has every application that they need to ensure that they are, ready to hit the ground running from day one. And again, if you want to know more about that onboarding application, we did a webinar on that last week. I'd highly advise you to check it out. But the idea is this: when your technician comes in here and says, okay, I need to add on, this software asset to this desktop. Let's see if I could find one here that I have an available license of, because it won't show you anything if you don't have an available license on it, which is cool, but at the same time, a little frustrating right now. That's okay, we can still talk about it. So the idea is that you can pick your software assets and your software licenses and then run the submit action button. And what it does is it actually runs a check on the software license list to make sure that you have the appropriate number of software licenses to assign to this hardware asset, right? So if we come into our software assets dashboard, we store all that information here. And basically what we've done is we've created a connection to this software license list. Say, okay, like, what do I have? How many are purchased? How many installed? And how many do I have available? Looks like I have a Linux available, right? So if I was to run an action on any other of these software licenses, it would not allow me to assign that software to that hardware asset because we're not in compliance here. We don't have the correct number of available count ready and rearing to go. So it just gives you the ability to really eliminate human error, right? I know we all get going pretty quickly. We all get moving. We all get shaking. And we have the ability to say, okay, all right, just add it. I know we have it. And then maybe we go back and it's not actually there. So this gives you the ability to ensure that, hey, you can only assign it if it's available on that list. And you run this submit action button. Another kind of highlight of what we can do from a forms perspective. Gives you the ability to run, a script or code on a form, whether just like we talked about on the external data, on the form load, on a column change, in a button. In this case, we're running it on a button. And what we're doing is we're updating that software license list to make sure that now our installed count is going to read appropriately. And we're adding that item to this hardware asset. Check in and check out, we talked about a little bit in the beginning here, but it just gives you the ability to assign an asset to a person. In this case, this signed out to Scott. And Scott is on the call right now. I'm sorry, I should have said this earlier, but Scott is on the call answering questions. So if you guys have any questions as we work our way through this webinar, feel free to shoot those over. He's manning the question poll. So if anything pops up, he will let me know and we could take a deeper dive. But as you can see, this is checked out to Scott. And it also keeps a running history of where this asset's been. So if you want to know who had it, when they had it, how long they had it for, what happened when they had it, what it does is it creates its own list item to say, hey, look, Ryan had this asset for this long and it was checked in at this date at this time. So it just gives you the ability to keep track of your assets, know where they are, know who has them, and how long they should have them for. And again, just like what we were talking about with the contract, service date and relates in regards to the contracts list. Any of these date columns, expected check-in date, actual check-in date, we can have some notification workflows built in around these to, your own liking. If you want everyone in the IT team or the facilities team to be notified when an asset is, added or checked back in, awesome. Anytime that assets check back in, they can get an email notification. If you want the end user to get a prompt to say, hey, you need to check this asset back in today, it's overdue today, that's also a possibility. So again, really highlights what we can do from a workflow perspective, in addition to the out-of-the-box product. Now, related items, what we can do here is, again, I sound like a broken record, I apologize, but it's really cool what we can do from a list, a list connection perspective, tying your asset to your manuals library, to your warranties library, to your contracts list, right? So maybe you're just storing contracts in the asset tracking application. Maybe you've gone out and you have that contract management application with Canyon already, and you want that contract list to be replicated in the asset tracking tool. All a possibility. And the cool thing here is that this asset is related directly to this particular contract. You can see the contract info. If you have the contract management application, again, we did that a few weeks ago, you can store some more information related to the contract. And then you can see all items related to this particular contract. So again, it highlights the idea of being able to access information within your environment, all from one screen. We could have cross-site collection lookups, cross-list lookups. Now, another thing I want to highlight from a connection perspective is that if we were to look at, an example of connecting this application to the contracts list, this asset list to the contracts list. Another option, a more common one or a pretty popular one, is connecting your assets to your IT tickets. So as you can see, I have a site here where that is configured. So not only can you see things like asset warranties, asset histories, but you can also see things like tickets, problems, change requests related to this asset as well. So at any time within the asset's history, you can see any pertinent piece of information associated with that asset, all from one screen. This related items tab we use very frequently in all of our applications, and it's one that I really like, and it's just because it's a time saver, right? So instead of having to bounce around, jump around, do different things, it's all available right there in one tab. The last tab here is our support tab, and this is preventative maintenance. So if you want to define a maintenance schedule for your asset types, for your individual assets, multiple maintenance schedules for asset types, if you want it to be done based on when they were added to the system, when you purchased them. If you want to lump them together, this is where we store that and we keep track of that. Again, we have that date column here, so it goes back to that notification workflow, notifying someone when the support and maintenance is due, creating a task for them to be tracked. Now, if you have the asset application as a standalone, we have created our own task system within it, so you can track maintenance tasks from the asset itself. But if you wanted to connect it to the IT help desk, that could easily be creating an IT ticket to go to your IT technicians to say, hey, this group of assets needs to be maintained on this day at this time by this vendor. Work orders. Hey, we need to run a maintenance on our HVAC system and it needs to go to my facilities department. All possible from the Crocanian toolset. And then you can also store things like, maintenance costs associated with it. But again, think of these tasks exactly like tickets. You pull up, you can see who it's assigned to. The person assigned to this task gets an email notification saying, hey, you've been assigned this task. They can have a link to it. If it needs to be approved, we have a uniform approval process that can be applied to any of our applications. You can start to see the connection, right? Everything wants to talk to each other. You've invested in this platform. We want you to be able to take advantage of it. So that's really looking at an individual asset or tracking an asset. We have some options that import the assets into the system. We have a Excel to SharePoint import tool. We also work with some other network finding tools, Landsweeper, SCCM. We've worked with a company called AirWatch in the past. So there are ways to get assets into the system as well. And then again, we looked a little bit at the contracts. Real quickly, I want to talk about vendors. Our vendors list is something that we see pretty frequently across our other applications as well, purchasing, contract management. So if you wanted to go down that route of connecting applications together, this vendors list can be uniform across multiple sites. But the idea is just like in the asset, when we pull up a vendor, we want to see all pertinent information related to that vendor. So their information, maybe their main point of contact, and then all items related to that vendor, maybe all assets, maybe all contracts, all softwares. If you want to have all POs related to that vendor, that's a possibility as well. But it all gives you this again at your fingertips. So if I was to click on asset 1, the Dell desktop, we'd be right back where we started, right? So we want to be able to jump from list to list, information to information with as few clicks as possible. Now, another thing I get asked a lot about when we do individual demos in the asset tracking tools, reports or dashboards. So our reporting tool is included in the Crocanian application. It's another piece of our Nitro Studio. So you have the ability to create, change, configure reports within inside of your environment. We build them into these different dashboards here. And what's cool about our reports is that they're actually pretty flexible. So you can report on really any information within the site. So as long as it's living within the site, we can report on it. You can have multiple reports rolling up into, or multiple lists rolling up into one report. You can, export these reports to PDF, to PNG. You can email them. You can print them. These are live, or they have the ability to be live, so they can update automatically. And what you can also do is actually have these reports be scheduled and sent to a person at a date and time cadence of your choosing. Again, I'm going to go back and highlight the cool features of the workflow tool is that leveraging that piece, you can send it to anyone you want, like I said, at a date and time cadence of your choosing. So maybe the CIO wants email notifications with where their assets are. Maybe someone wants to see all assets by category at the end of every month. That is definitely a possibility, and it can either come over as an attachment in their email in the body or as a link to the site itself. But again, it kind of gives you the ability to create those reports, set and forget them, and have them be sent to people without you having to think about it, right? It's done once, and then it flows smoothly from there on out. Now, so we talked a little bit about our end user interface, right? That self-service portal, being able to submit requests. So maybe in the asset tracking space, it's a hardware request, a loaner request, right? So they can submit a request to that portal. The technician's interface is what we were just working out of, right? How to change an asset, how to update an asset, how to complete a task against an asset, right? The third side, and all of our applications, what we preach is kind of these three different layers of permissions. And the third side is the admin side, right? So who's going to be able to come in and own this application? Who's going to be able to change it to make it make sense for you, or really just configure things as you grow? And that's done through the application admin center. And you can do things like configure your pertinent lists here, right? Assets, asset types, maybe a maintenance schedule. We talked about this a little bit for the support tab, but defining different maintenance schedules by asset type, definitely a possibility. And here's where those images are stored, right? And then again, access to our Nitro Studio. So if you haven't seen Nitro before, it's going to take us to another interface. And this interface gives us the ability to view all of the tools that we use that go into our applications, segmented into their own little piece. So once it loads here, give us a sec. Show you what that looks like. So here's our Nitro Studio. So it's forms, it's workflows, it's reporting, it's that self-service portal I keep talking about. It's AI services connected to Teams maybe. It's branding, it's list views, list searches, what we looked at already within the asset tracking tool. It's printing. You know, if anyone tried to print on top of SharePoint, we know that it can be a headache, right? Linking multiple items together, linking multiple lists together. So all of that is controlled through our main Nitro interface. Our tool is really cool. Our Nitro tool set is really cool. So to give you a little bit of history, we talked about it briefly, but to take a deeper dive, we used to leverage other third-party tools up until about 5 years ago. And then we decided, you know what, it makes more sense for us to have our own tool set to create our applications. Hence, Nitro Studio was born. Really, in the last 2 years, it's come a long way. Our tool set is a full info path replacement as a standalone. So we offer Nitro Studio as its own standalone, deploy this to your site, create as you please. But you get all that power of an info path replacement of a fully functioning forms tool within your application. So you have access to this for this site. Again, it's not an additional cost, and you can come in here and change everything to make it make sense for you. Another cool piece here is that we're actually writing our forms directly onto a SharePoint list. I'm just going to briefly touch on the forms tool. So we're not tied to a user, right? So we're not, if someone leaves or is sick or whatever it may be, and their workflow or the form is tied to their login and we can't get it and it causes a headache, not a problem. You get added as an admin to the site and you can come in and configure the form for that, whatever list that you want, right? Whatever workflow you want within that site, gives you that ability. But again, I was talking about maybe this location owner tab. If we want to remove a SharePoint column, you can. You know, if you want to edit a column, you have the ability to do so. So some basic SharePoint functionality built in from the form designer tool. You don't have to bump into the list settings. If you want to create a SharePoint column, you have that ability to do so, right? Again, right from the forms interface. If you want to change the look and feel of the forms, you absolutely can. You know, maybe you want a little softer on the eyes than the generic SharePoint white, right? Okay, well, maybe we'll change it to a blue on blue color scheme. Gives you the ability to match your internal color scheme. You can come in here and you can create your own theme, all the way down to font family, font type, font color, back color, padding, all the way down to tab and section control, right? Gives you the ability to control what these forms how these forms look and feel. Oh, wrong tab. Sorry, guys. So from a UI perspective, that's up to you. If you have a CSS, great. We have the ability to inject CSS directly into a form here as well. Now, we also have the ability to do like basic SharePoint permissions, you know, being able to see tabs or show and hide tabs or columns based on particular instances, like we talked about with the computer tab. You know, if that asset type is not related or doesn't have any software associated to it, we can configure unique permissions on it. We can have column validations, form event actions, all the way down to the developer side of, you know, calling out to external data columns, leveraging custom JavaScript, like we talked a little bit about, that script action button. But it really gives you the ability to take it and run with it. I mean, we can spend 3 hours alone on the forms tool, let alone Nitro Studio. But what I'm trying to highlight is this cool power and functionality that you get included with the asset tracking application. You're not relying upon us to manage and maintain your application if you don't want us to. If you want us to, great. We're here for support. We're here for professional services, but we want to give you the tools. We want to give you all the tools that we can to make you as successful as possible with this application. And whether that's Nitro training, getting you up and running with application training, that's all possible within the Crocanian space. So, I mean, really, I said I'd keep it short and sweet. We're right at the half-hour mark, and that was my goal today, to make sure we were right around half hour for this application demo. So I want to open it up to you guys. If you have any questions, feel free to shoot those over now. I feel like a question came in. I thought I saw one. Scott, did anything come in while I was chatting?
Yes, there was one about migrating from an existing system to assets. So the migration of
that's a really good question, and it's one we talk about a lot. And my answer is intended to be a little vague. So it really is dependent upon, the easiest way to answer it is, it's really dependent upon how much time you can give us, right? Exporting out and importing assets into the system, you guys can take that on internally and get that done on your own time. If you want us to do it, not a problem. And then it's really a matter of how much time you can give us during the initial setup of the application is going to determine how quickly we can get it to go live, right? If you can only meet with us once every couple of weeks, your go live date's going to be different than maybe if someone can meet with us twice a week, right? So we have documentation, we have training material, we have videos, we have dedicated trainers that can get you up and running and up to speed. But it's really going to be relying upon how much time you can give us during the install process. But typically anywhere between 3 and 6 weeks, give or take, depending on, like I said, that time frame. Let's see, we got another one in here. The Nitro Studio tool does look pretty cool. If you're able to get the asset management tool, which includes Nitro, said you can use the Nitro Studio to develop. Correct. So yeah, the Nitro Studio is really cool. Love it. And it's a part of the asset tracking application, right? So it's included in this tool. It's not an additional cost. If you wanted to have Nitro, or if you wanted to develop with Nitro inside of your SharePoint tenancy or 365 tenancy, absolutely, it is a separate costing model though. So whether it's on a per site basis, we have like a minimum of 3 sites, or across your entire tenancy, all possible. And if you're interested in pricing on either assets or Nitro Studio itself, feel free to shoot us a note. Sales@crocanian.com. You can call us directly. Myself, Scott manages that inbox. We'd be happy to discuss pricing with you of what that looks like for both assets and Nitro.
Okay, good, great.
What other questions do you guys have? Okay, well, if anyone's typing, I'll give you a few more minutes. Just briefly, I want to talk a little bit about things to come. Now that it looks like we've asked all of our questions here, and something cool that's happening in the Crocanian space is the ability to integrate with a modern UI, right? So that's something that's new. I'm showing on Classic. I show on Classic in our webinars because we do have some folks who are on-prem, as well as 365. I don't want to alienate, but we do absolutely have the ability to have our applications available on the modern UI. And something that is brand new and happening is our Teams integration. I talked about it briefly, but what we're doing and what we're exploring is having all of our applications be available in Teams, right? It's crazy the amount Teams has grown in the last couple weeks, couple months. I don't know, for those of you who are sports fans, I was watching the NFL draft and it was all hosted by Teams, right? It's really come a long way, and we want to give you every opportunity to take advantage of that. Microsoft is pushing the Teams interface as much as they can, and all of our applications are going to be available within the Teams space here coming shortly. We're working as hard as we can to make sure that happens. Whether that's accessing the backend SharePoint site, leveraging our AI services for team spots, notification spots, support bots. We just did a webinar on that in a previous week. Feel free to check that out. But that is something cool and new and exciting coming down the Crocanian pipeline. And keep eyes out for another webinar to show exactly how those applications can be included in your team space. Scott, I know you're kind of pioneering that internally here. Do you want to add anything to that while we have everyone's attention?
Yeah, Teams integration is really cool. It has there's a bot, you could call it, or it's really an app that runs in Teams, and it gives the ability for the users to submit questions or issues or problems, and then it goes into staff, and the staff is able to go to Teams also and be able to address that issue or question, whether they're going to assign it to themselves or add notes to it or close it out or communicate with the end user. There's a lot of notification back and forth between the back end system, which runs in SharePoint, and the front end, which runs in Teams. There's workflow. Our workflow manager and our custom actions have the ability to notify teams, our channels, or whatever. So this interaction between the applications we have that run primarily in the SharePoint space, and then the interface running in the Teams space, makes a very good a very good combination, so that a person could be in Teams and do most of the functionality of the application without ever going back to SharePoint, if that's the way you want to work, or your end users want to work, or a particular staff wants to work. They can do that. But there's also the ability to go to SharePoint. In SharePoint, we have the SharePoint pages, we have the web portal pages. So if a person wants to work in that space, they can do that also. So we give a lot of flexibility. The point is to say that we can operate fully in SharePoint, and on premises, SharePoint on premises, you would be doing that anyway. But online, we had the ability to go to the Teams interface and use the features that are there more and more and more, with an app that shows the interface, with a bot that gives some function. Well, I should actually mention the bot is more than just a user simply putting in a ticket. The bot gives answers back. So the person might have a problem, question, or whatever, and they enter it into the bot, and then the bot with programs so that it can respond based on knowledge that's in the back-end system. So it might be, how do I fix this printer or something, or how do I change the toner, or how do I change my password, or if you're in HR, it could be a question about benefits or leave or dependents or something like that, or payroll, or if you're in your other departments, it could be other questions about those kind of things. So the bot is one thing, an entity unto itself, a Teams bot that can be used to answer a lot of questions in any department. And in our IT help desk and our asset management, we made the bot specifically focused on helping answer the questions, and also creating tickets and issues right from the bot itself. So it's a lot going on in that Teams development and integration world on our end. We're going to have some webinar about that in mid-May. I think May 14th, I think is the day.
Yeah, and as you were chatting, I was just kind of highlighting that Teams bot that we have ready and ready to go. Just being able to log in real quickly, ask what service area I need help in, putting in my, my information, getting some articles that match my problem, and then give me some prompts to go from there. So as you can see, this is live and ready to go. And like Scott said, we're going to be looking at a pretty comprehensive webinar in mid-May, right? Mid-May.
See, I think it's May 14th right now. We're going to get it up on the website anytime now.
Cool.
Yeah, well, yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining. Thanks Scott for popping on and answering questions and filling us in on the Teams interface. And we will send a follow-up email after this call today with the recording, as well as some links to the other webinars that we covered in the past weeks. So keep eyes for that. If you have any questions, like I said, feel free to reach out to us directly at sales@crowcanyon.com or by phone number. Thanks everyone. Appreciate your time.
Okay, thanks Ryan. Good.